Welcome, welcome everybody. Marisa will get us going in a couple of, I think now we're at seconds. In some
Yeah, we
seconds,
are
we'll
at
get
seconds.
started.
We are at the top of the hour, so let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Management Q's webinar series on the art of effective leadership. Today's session is the first in a series over the next 5 weeks to provide a snapshot of the leadership skills that help managers excel in their role. I'm Marisa Stoltzfus, your HROD executive expert, bringing you more than 25 years of experience, and I have the privilege of hosting this webinar series. In our previous webinar series, The Art of Effective Management, we focused on those functions that contribute to high-performing managers. The art of effective leadership takes the manager's skill to the next level, providing the crossover and differences between managing work and leading people. In this series, we'll share bits of knowledge, some tips, and a few tools that will help you navigate the differences between management and leadership. While this series is not a comprehensive training program, we will explore the various functions of leadership and share a few key takeaway ideas for you to consider on your professional journey. For today, we'll provide an overview of the 5 functions of leadership. Feel free to participate actively by entering questions or comments in the chat during the session. And now, here's Dr. Myra Austin, CEO and founder of Management Q's, to walk us through today's content. Dr. Myra, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. So if any of you participated in our Art of Effective Management series, you know that we're going to take things and break them down into digestible bits, and that this is a quick leadership overview for you guys, or even maybe a fundamental dial in. So let's get into it. So before we get started, a little bit about our experience at the table here. I'm Dr. Myra Austin. I'm the CEO and founder of Management Q's, and my passion and experience really comes from the operational areas of business. I'm a management enthusiast and a champion for all of you. I believe in the difference that you can make in the workforce, and I believe in building excellent relationships, which we'll get into in this series, with partners like Marisa. So a little bit on Marisa. So she's an HR executive with a wealth of knowledge, over 2 decades of knowledge she brings to the table at the executive level. And so in her role, she also exercises areas of management and areas of leadership. But more relevant and importantly to you, she partners with managers in a way that I see sometimes doesn't take place in the workforce. So take advantage of the webinar sessions, ask us questions, send us emails. We mean for it to be collaborative. We're here for you. It's part of our mission to create equity in the workforce environment and to upskill managers so that they become the best people out there that they can be. And through their influence, which we'll talk about today, make a difference in the world. Okay? All right, let's get into it. Leadership is a little bit different than management is what you'll learn. So just a little bit about Management Q's. We are a training and development organization, and we're unique in that we measure performance in the training experience. We're backed by neuroscience, and we care deeply about you taking tactical lessons into the workforce and actually knowing what to do with them. Okay, so we take special care in those areas. We also believe in providing learning opportunities in different ways and through different vehicles. And so we care that people learn in different ways. So we provide these webinars, custom training programs, tools, templates, freebies, all anything you can think of, we do because we care about the manager's experience out there. Okay, so today we're going to break down leadership. Okay, and there's distinct differences between management and leadership, and I think that's going to be the biggest takeaway for today's session. We're going to break down the functions of leadership. If you were able to join us in the last series where we covered the 5 different functions of management, you want to combine those 2 areas. That series is also available on YouTube if you want to take a look, but we're going to break it down. We're going to go through some key takeaways for you on leadership. We'll talk about some resources, and then we'll do some Q&A. If you have any questions, closing remarks, or feedback, we'd love to partner with you on that. Okay, here we go. Let's get into the beef of this subject. Okay, so it's important in the workforce to have both great leaders and great managers. Okay, so that partnership is really what ultimately leads us to succeed. When there's leadership brings in the softer side of people, right? It influence speaks to those areas. So the first thing that I think is relevant to managers is knowing that there's a difference between both concepts and that each concept has an ultimate deliverable that you have to look towards. So managers who become familiar with the five functions of leadership develop a higher capacity to lead, right? So while management is a role and usually designated by title, leadership is not. Leadership is a skill, right? So understanding these differences is ultimately what leads to effectiveness. The most effective managers balance the functions of management and leadership in the execution of their role. So, stated simply, leadership is a skill that can be developed at any stage. And so I know for myself, and I'll ask Marisa in a second, but in my own experience when I was younger, I really thought leadership was linked to authority. And I feel like that led me down the wrong path. And we're talking about early years in management and in the workforce, but it is these types of fundamental concepts that sometimes enable a lack of success, right? Any thoughts on that, Marisa?
Yeah, oftentimes managers think they're not leaders, right? Because they don't have the elevated title or they're somewhere in the middle of the hierarchy of an organization. And you can be a leader in your management role. And yes, you can learn how to be a leader. So the first time I heard that concept, I was blown away. I was like, what do you mean you can learn leadership? I thought it was innate to people. And it's innate in that you need to have the desire to want to lead because it's not easy. But yes, if you're here and you're listening, that's great. We can help.
Yes, absolutely. So you're probably thinking, if you've never heard of leadership in this way, what are the five functions of leadership? So these are really the five core functions of leadership, and I'll go through this session and kind of explain why they're relevant and why they add up to the function of leadership. And it's influencing, motivating, inspiring, creating, and mentoring. So to be a well-balanced leader slash manager, you have to be aware that there's these functions that have to be realized within the role and your interactions with every person that you work with or partner with in the workforce environment. Okay, so we're going to break each of these down again into digestible nuggets because we only have 30 minutes. But we hope that this stirs you up a little bit, right? That you have some questions around this stuff and that it starts to trigger you in the right way. So influence has nothing to do with title. So let's start there. We can influence one another by the way that we interact with each other. And again, nothing to do with title, but everything to do with leadership. Okay. So influencing is the ability to impact business results by changing behaviors and inspiring others to act. So it's not forced, it's something that you nurture. Okay. It's the ability to have people change values, beliefs, or attitudes about a topic. Okay. So it's a very intrinsic type of experience that happens when influence is taking place. A leader can use their knowledge or speaking ability to create influence. Leaders who understand influence also understand what moves people and what creates a sense of urgency. So, really, what that means is it's understanding the person across from you in a way where you know that what's important to you may not be important to them. And it's almost like a matter of in an exchange, immediately you can see that, right? So again, these things take awareness, but they also take practice. Marisa, as an HR professional, that one I think is something HR professionals actually dabble in quite a bit of influence driven situations because of the tough interactions you tend to have.
Yep.
Any feedback on that area?
Just one thing that's coming to mind is that the ability to influence is not just about how smart you are or the ability, how well you can articulate your thinking. It's also about your behaviors, right? People watch what you do. And
Yeah.
so, and in HR, we see it all. So, and in many cases, people come to HR to ask us for our experience.
Yeah.
And so, it's really important to, when you're being influential, that you're not being manipulative, and the two can cross. So that's my thinking there.
Yeah, or contradictory behaviors, right? So contradictory behaviors actually work against creating influence. So for our managers out there, if you're looking to build a capacity to lead, to be a better leader, to be more influential, pay attention to any contradictions that may exist between what you say or what you ask of somebody to do and what you are actually doing. Okay, because
Excellent point.
that will work against you. So influencing can only take place when there is trust. So trust is super fragile and difficult to build and easy to shatter, right? Trust will shatter in a matter of seconds with the right hurtful action, right? And so we have to be careful and mindful that in our objective, in our exchange with people, we are trying to nurture influence, and that'll help us kind of dial it back a little bit when we're too much in our own head. The influence function of leadership heavily influences company culture. So the way that leadership or leadership teams handle the concept of influence are directly related to what kind of an environment you're creating or what kind of an environment you're currently in. All right, let's keep going. Okay, feel free to ask any questions along the way. If you have any in the chat, we'll be paying attention to those. So motivating. Motivating is a central function of leadership, right? That function that makes you want to get up in the morning and work and partner with somebody. That's kind of motivation along with inspiration, which we'll touch on. So the motivating function of leadership is an active mental process, okay? And it shapes and encourages a strong team and performance dynamic. So that's what motivation really does, right? It helps people achieve common goals. So if you're working and you feel like you're laboring something and you're really just doing it by yourself and it feels that way, there's a lack of motivation in the group. And so it's important for upcoming aspiring leaders to be able to recognize what it is that's lacking from the 5 functions of leadership in their interactions or in the environment. So motivation solidifies expectations. Okay, a leader and a manager who understands motivation can shape and encourage a strong performance dynamic, right? So that's really, really critical. Motivating is what helps people really get behind something together collectively. So if that feeling is lacking, motivation techniques in this series is going to be really helpful for you. Leaders are responsible for motivating their teams as part of their role. So it's not something that only people who are good at it need to do, right? Or only specialized experts motivate other people. If you're in a management role and you're looking to be a leader as well within that role, you have to give motivation its importance. Hey, inspiring. So inspiring is a function of leadership that can elevate team member and organizational performance. It can foster a culture of high engagement and commitment. So note the differences between motivation and inspiration because they're often confused, right? Sometimes there's a little bit of overlap, it feels, but there's distinct differences. And so inspiring really is speaking to the engagement, right? And the commitment and taking it one step further. Inspirational leaders have vision. So as a manager, providing direction, guidance, and the end point of what you're trying to get your team to do, that's you being a leader, right? Executing to get there, that's you being a manager, right? So those are the distinct things that that come into play as we're executing in the workforce. They are authentic and they're transparent. So I'll say this, being honest is a difficult thing, and it seems to create great challenges in terms of how to be transparent and to what degree, right? And sometimes we get in our own way of being inspirational. And the reason we do that is because being transparent is hard, right? Any recommendations, Marisa, from you from an HR
Do.
perspective on how to be transparent in a tactful way?
Okay, so a couple of thoughts come to mind. First and foremost, motivating. If you want to motivate, focus on core values, right? What are we about? What do we believe as a company? If you want to inspire, think about the vision, the goals, the strategy. In terms of authentic and transparent communication, sometimes this is just a crapshoot. You are who you are. You're hardwired in a certain way. Um, you just need to be authentic. You need to build that trust so that when you are transparent, um, people see the authenticity that lies behind your transparency. Um, you're going to learn School of Hard Knocks when it comes to transparency. I think that's the easiest way for me to share.
Yeah.
So when you make a mistake, you learn from it and you adjust.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, people will always appreciate honesty over a fancy workaround in words.
Mhm.
And I think that as managers, we have to recognize all people are smarter than we give them credit for sometimes in any given moment. And so if you treat people that way, you tend to just know how to say it because you're not undermining their disposition. So just be careful, but be transparent and be honest about what's happening because sometimes trying to cover it up or trying to say it in a different way is just chipping away at the inspiration and motivation of the team. Okay. Honesty will get you much further than anything else would. Okay, creating. So in leadership, there's this creativity around leadership and effective leadership. Okay. So creating is really a function of developing new ideas, bringing freshness to the table, problem solving, thinking outside the box, right?
Mhm.
These types of things actually motivate and inspire as well. But it's the creativity function of leadership, right? It's having that almost boldness to step into seeing things in a different way versus waiting to be told or thinking that because it's been done a certain way, it's the only way, right? So there's that aspect, that component of leadership, and it engages and taps into ideas at all ranks. So for me, this bullet is probably the most important bullet. It's understanding that you can learn something from everybody at every single level. And as a leader, being resourceful enough to capture it, that oftentimes is what's going to give you the solutions to the problems that you have. Whether it's one-on-one conflict, whether it's problem solving for the organization on an operational challenge, or whether it's really understanding the dynamic of your team, it's being able to capture ideas at all ranks. And a way of doing that from a leadership perspective is asking the right questions, right? So in meetings, making sure you're asking everybody around the tables what their thoughts are, making sure that if somebody's still processing, you acknowledge that they're processing and you come back to them, right? Having a tracker where you're tracking feedback or ideas that come up, even if you're not ready to implement or even if it's not relevant at that time, right? It's creating these mechanisms that allow for leadership type of creativity that really make a difference and allow you to then problem solve it in a different way.
Yeah.
Anything around creativity, Marisa, you're quite creative on
Direct,
your end.
direct connection to inspiring and motivating, right? So if you're in this place of engaging your teams for the purpose of creativity and solving problems, and to get to decision making, you're motivating and inspiring in those moments.
Yeah, and I'll say this, playing devil's advocate, right? If you have a management team or a leadership team that's only taking ideas from the top, they're really missing the boat, right? So you also need to guard the dynamic that you're either lending to or working against, because you can also break that trajectory by presenting some great ideas on how to do that differently. I will say this in my own experience as an operations leader at an executive level, I have solved with feedback and ideas from the people in the front lines. And that's how it's happened almost consistently across the board. And so giving them a voice is part of being a creative leader and knowing how to help everybody make feel like they're part of the objective of the mission and the journey, right? Okay, mentoring. So mentoring is the function of leadership that refers to giving a first-hand experience to team members in different roles throughout your company. So I really like that bullet because I can probably count the number of times I've heard mentoring said in different ways that don't really link up to management and leadership in the workforce environment. Mentoring is an effective way to manage people, to create a path for them, to enable leadership in them, right? Mentorship is something that is different from training, is different from coaching, is different from managing. And so knowing what each of those things are, by the way, will give you a competitive advantage. So maybe we touch on that in a future session, but mentoring is quite special. It's providing team members with assignments that are growth oriented, right? It's as a leader thinking, I think this person is ready for a different opportunity. I think this person is looking to be seen, is looking to be heard. Let me give them an opportunity to see how they handle that, right? It's looking past what's available. Okay, so they're not doing the work just because it's leftover work or just because it needs to be delegated. Mentoring is giving them something that's a fit for them and giving them a platform on which to do it. Okay, it's setting people up for success, is what mentoring is. Leaders who understand mentoring provide constructive feedback. So we're not friends when we're mentors. When we're being that kind of leader, we're not being friends, we are being mentors, which means that we are providing constructive feedback. So for those of you, if you're not clear on constructive feedback means you're going through something that's critical, but you're stating it in a way that's digestible, that's positive, that's encouraging, versus something that's breaking somebody down. Okay, so that's what mentoring looks like in a leadership capacity, right? When you're talking about being a leader and the interaction that you're having with team members, they redirect team members who are moving in the wrong direction. That means if you see a team member that's being abrasive in communication, if you see a team member that has trouble articulating their concerns, if you see team members that aren't familiar or don't have HR knowledge, and so they're going to walk right into that wall that they're not seeing, right? That's a mentor, right? So it goes past, again, those areas that we talked about. It's different from a coach. It's different from a trainer. It's different from a manager. Mentoring has their success in mind, and their success is an objective, right? So a leader mentors. Any thoughts on mentorship, Marisa?
That was so well said. We can move on.
Okay, you got it. You got it. So this is one of the infographics that I really love because I feel like it really explains and accentuates the differences between leadership and management. And so for leadership, leaders set vision, right? They provide direction, overall direction. And managers help people follow that vision and hence execute. And so as managers within our title, within our function in those roles, we're managing along the way, right? That's part of what we do to make sure things end up as they should. Leadership think of ideas. And again, this is linked to that creative function, thinking of ideas, new ways of doing things. That's the leader in you doing that. And then managers think execution. So they think, how are we going to do this? Right? That's the distinction, right? As an operator, I've spent my whole life thinking, how am I going to do this? And I really enjoy that part of the workforce. Leaders inspire people, right? So we talked about inspiration. And then managers drive people's success. So they make sure they're doing the right things at the right time. Okay. So if you're a checklist person, you probably make a great manager. Okay. So the question you need to ask yourself is, are you a great leader? right? Because you've got one bucket and we're looking at the other one today. Leadership look to the future. So they are always looking at what's coming down the pipeline. They forecast and they anticipate is what that means, right? So as a manager, we're focusing on the present. We're making sure the work gets done, right? And I say work because sometimes we get too caught up on that and we don't balance things out, right? So you have to be able to anticipate to fill that leadership capacity. Leaders shape the culture. A leader cares about what's being represented and they care about what's being manifested in the environment. A manager endorses culture, right? So again, they have the checklist and they're saying, well, we're doing this to meet culture objectives. We're doing that to meet culture objectives. Back to Marisa's point on core values and a vision and mission statement, the manager is checking the boxes. The leader is saying, how does this feel? Right? Very different there. Yep. Leadership solidifies expectations. So solidifying expectations means this is what we were meant to complete. We're headed in the right direction, right? You're reinforcing that kind of a thing. The manager has controls in place to guarantee that it happens, right? So there's a difference there. And if you notice, the leader is saying, yes, we're moving in the right direction. And the manager is saying, here's what we've got in place so that we don't fail, right? And so the partnership is so critical to being successful because you need both, right? Both are needed. So that's kind of the key there. Anything on that, Marisa?
Amazing distinctions. I love this infographic. Everybody should have it end up wherever they work.
All right. Well, if you need it and you want a separate one, you will get the deck emailed to you. But if you want the infographic, I'm happy to send it to you. Okay. And influential leader outcomes. So why do we do all this? Why does all of this matter at all, even a little bit, right? So it matters because the outcomes of leadership are these when it's effective. There's teamwork development, right? The team grows together, wins together. Subordinate representation, everybody's represented, right? There's counseling team members as part of day-to-day culture. So you know what's happening, you know what their needs are, you know what's holding them back, right? And that's why it's important to have dialogue, to have influence, to motivate, to inspire. There's appropriate power distribution. It's not just about you, right? As a manager, it's easy to fall into the authoritarian trap because you have authority, right? So balancing these things is important. There's effective use of time. You're breaking and balancing out these areas of management and leadership, not management is largely heavily execution focused, which means what? You're going to be working, right? But you can't be all work because you have such an important role to play with people, and people aren't robots. And you'll hear me say that multiple times in our series, but because there's that people function, there's a little bit more needed. Effective direction and guidance. So leadership enables you to keep the direction in mind and to guide people to an end result, right? Versus only focusing on short term, which if you're a really strong manager and a weak leader, that's what's going to happen. You're only going to focus on short term. Encourage spirited debate. A leader creates psychological safety and encourages people to disagree. I know that may seem a little counterintuitive, but if people don't disagree, they don't trust you. Because only when somebody trusts you will they say, I don't agree with that, Myra. I don't agree with that, Marisa. I actually think this is how it should go, right? And you're missing out on their perspective. And there's been many times, I will say this with Marisa here, because I debate with her quite a bit, where we don't agree, but I also didn't see her perspective. And so then I'm like, oh, that changed my perspective. So you miss out on that opportunity and that exchange with team members when you don't encourage the appropriate degree of debate. Expedient conflict resolution, right? So when there's conflict, a leader is going to resolve it, not avoid it, not wait to resolve it a month later. You're going to solve it now because you're giving the human being a priority. What's more important, the person in front of you or the business? This is a tough question for most managers. I'm going to tell you, it's always the person in front of you. right? Why? Because that's what a leader does, right? That's how a leader makes
Well said.
priority. Yep, that's
Well
the only way.
said. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Preach, right? Proactive participation, suggestions and recommendations, right? So there's this engagement going on. It's part of the motivation and inspiration a leader provides. It's the degree of interaction. When you have a leader that's sitting in their office and isn't interacting, and they're only interacting with the work, is the work going to trust them? Like, is that the equation we want to, like, is that what a leader does? No, because the trust needs to come from the team that they work with, right? Not the work
Right.
that they're doing. So there's a distinction there that needs to be made. Set suitable and achievable objectives. So you don't know if the objectives are suitable or achievable if you're not talking to people and focusing on the influence that you need to create with them. Propels growth and forward thinking strategy. So again, always future. The leader is always thinking towards the future, and the manager is always in the present. So you need a little bit of both. Okay. And as you move up the ladder, one may take priority over the other, depending on the role that you have. But at the end of the day, you do need balance between both. Okay.
We're at the
Okay.
bottom of the hour, Dr. Myra. Perfect time for our key takeaways.
Yeah, perfect time. We're at the close. We know it's short and sweet, but we hope you join us for session 2. So these are our key takeaways for today. It's possible to be a great manager and not a great leader, and vice versa, right? So don't think just because you're a great manager, that automatically makes you a great leader, and vice versa. Both managers and leaders are needed for organizational success to take place. Okay, so keep that in mind. A great leader who has little managerial skills can pull a team in several directions with too much vision, creating a lot of noise, but little in way of results. So being effective requires discipline, folks.
Yep.
A manager who lacks leadership ability often struggles to rally the troops to a new normal when change is needed. When change is needed, you need to activate your leadership. Okay. Yep. If you will be leading team members, you must learn to develop influence to keep them engaged. If you're strictly a manager, it's going to be difficult for you to engage people. Okay. You need that balance to do both. Okay. I'll hand it back to you, Marisa.
Very good. So as we conclude today's session, of course, I encourage all of you to consider what functional area do you excel in, and how would you leverage that functional area or that leadership skill, while considering which functional leadership skill you'd like to further develop. To help you revisit this content, the recording of this webinar and the deck will be emailed to all participants in follow-up. You can also find additional resources, including management planners and other tools to support your ongoing development at managementcues.org. We'll continue the Art of Effective Leadership series on Tuesday, May 21st at noon Pacific. So plan to join us or connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube to stay updated on future events, submit questions, look at former sessions, and of course, to share your feedback. Thank you for being part of the Art of Effective Leadership in today's series. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a great week. Bye.